Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grow With Us. My name is Evan Barton, and I'm your host who helps create conversations with the innovators and leaders of a growing tech center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The Grow With Us podcast highlights the work of community leaders, tech entrepreneurs, nonprofit professionals, and talent development advocates in Tulsa. Grow With Us is a podcast of In Tulsa. In Tulsa's mission is to connect talented individuals and companies to stimulate economic growth in Tulsa and to create more prosperous communities across the region. Each episode, Grow With Us discusses the growth of opportunities, the growth of communities striving for change, or the tech and innovation that is changing the landscape of Tulsa. On this episode of Grow With Us, I speak with Matthew Dean, crew leader for Arts and Entertainment Crew with TYPROS and a graphic designer. Matthew and I discuss his role in marketing and graphic design, being a crew leader with TYPROS and its many initiatives, and his experience in the workplace with layoffs and furloughs. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Grow With Us. I'm super excited today to welcome Matthew Dean to the podcast. Matthew, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Evan. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is going to be an awesome episode. I'm really excited about getting to share a little bit of your story and some of the topics that we're going to talk about. We've had the pleasure of interacting a couple of times prior to the idea of you coming on this podcast happen. But I remember the first time I met you was doing an event that I'm pretty sure you helped co-lead when we went to the First Americans Museum last year.
Yep, I was shadowing the then current Arts and Entertainment Crew leader as I was coming in that following year just to see how she ran things.
Awesome. Well, I mean, if you follow in her lead, that was a great lead. That was a great event, and I hope that there are many more like that and everything. And we'll get to talk a little bit more about what crew and all that, some of these words that we're talking about. But I'd love for you to just start us off with telling us your story in whatever way you're comfortable, Matt.
Sure thing. So I was born and raised in Michigan, in the suburbs outside of Detroit. Spent the first 18 years of my life there. And in that time, I knew nothing about Tulsa. I knew nothing about Oklahoma. I could point to it on a U.S. map in preschool, but beyond that, I had no idea what went on down there. I just didn't know, and I never really thought about it very much. So flash forward to sophomore, junior year of high school, and I'm starting to look at colleges. And at the time, I'm thinking, I don't really know what I want to do after high school. I don't know what college I'm going to go to. And again, at this point, I'm halfway through my career. So it's just like, I'm running out of time. So I got to make up my mind. So of the universities I was looking at, I heard about this little school called Oral Roberts University through my church. And so there were 3 instances in which I visited Tulsa in that time. The summer of 2010, the fall of 2010, and then the spring of 2011. And the first time I went, it was just to tour campus, just to get an idea of the size of the campus and to just get a feel for it. And the next 2 times were to see what it was like to have students on campus, get a little bit of student life, sit in on some classes, and get a feel for what that's like. And the more that I visited campus, the more I was drawn to the size, the fact that there was a lot of regional and international representation. And I just, at one point, I just threw my hands up and I said, okay, God, if this is where you want me to go, if Tulsa is where you want me to go, then show me. And it was steadily increasing. The more I went down there, the more signs, the more affirmations that I got. I got accepted to the school. I got a decent scholarship through the school. And then the final cherry on top happened after my final visit. My dad and I were heading to the airport to return to Michigan. And as we were heading to our gate, we were passing this TGI Fridays in the airport. And who do we see in this TGI Fridays but the president of the university?
Oh, cool.
And he had introduced himself to us when I was, to students like me who were visiting on campus. So I got to see him and get familiar with him. And so my dad and I go up to him and we introduce ourselves. And then he's eating lunch. He's heading to another speaking engagement somewhere else. And so he invites us over to sit with him and have lunch with him and just to talk. And so I basically just told my whole life story up to this point, not unlike what I'm doing here.
Exactly.
And
except I'm not the president of
you're not a president of the university, but that's okay. That's all right. So yeah, I told him my whole life story. And at some point near the end of our conversation, I say, I really like ORU's campus, but I just don't know if I want to commit yet. I'm not really sure. And I'm slightly paraphrasing now because it's been so long, but he looked me right in the eyes and he said, I have a feeling you're meant to be here. And that just stuck with me. And after we parted ways and I flew back home, I said, yep, That's it. That's all I needed. Tulsa it is. Here I come.
I love that. That's awesome. And so you packed your bags and made it down here for undergrad for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Heck yeah.
Mm-hmm. And little did I know that would only be the beginning of my Tulsa journey.
Yeah.
That will only be the beginning.
I love that. And I think it's interesting that we've had lots of people come on the podcast talking about like school being I guess the catalyst to their Tulsa journey, but also so many people that I think because Tulsa doesn't really have like too many big universities, it really is people's like postgraduate or like master's or JD that they do law school or something here.
Mm-hmm.
But undergraduate experience here, that is very, very different. There really is a small sample size of folks that experience Tulsa in that 18 to 22 range.
Mm-hmm.
People in my kind of peer group, I think, are actually oftentimes leave and then come back, which was my experience. But I bet Tulsa was pretty wild for 18 to 22, but also being at a Bible college. I hope that's not like derogatory.
No,
I think it's descriptive.
No, technically it's a liberal arts university. Okay, but I mean, that is theology. Obviously, is a huge component of it.
Yeah, and I guess not shockingly, but I have a couple of connections to that university in my personal life. Like my dad went there for undergrad for a couple of years to play baseball. That was how I first really got familiar with the school and its program. And my dad likes to just randomly go watch baseball games with people all the time. And so we would go see like some season at ORU in like 2010, probably like when you were a student there.
Yeah. That's one time I was visiting probably.
Oh yeah, exactly. And then my stepdad actually received his master's in theology from ORU too. So
good deal.
Got two paternal connections there, which is interesting.
That's very specific, but that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, and you hinted at your Tulsa experience kind of being now in like two stages. So this was your first introduction to Tulsa. What's your experience like in Tulsa now? You obviously live and work here and have your own things going on here now. But tell me a little bit about what's Tulsa like for you now, and really feel free to compare and contrast between the student experience and where you are now.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because 75% of my college career was me being tethered on campus because I didn't have a car. And unless I was hitching a ride with people to go elsewhere, or I was taking a bus to the mall, to Woodland Hills, like I really didn't.
We have buses here?
I know, right? I know. After 6 p.m. they cease to exist. But unless I was doing one of those, I really didn't get off campus much. And on top of that, I was only in South Tulsa, which is not the full embodiment of the rest of the city whatsoever.
Yeah, we're like 10 miles from, I think, the campus where we are right now.
Exactly. So it wasn't until my senior year where I got my first Jeep and I was really able to explore town a little bit. And I worked the summer after I graduated, so I was really able to explore downtown and go to Midtown and all the other parts of Tulsa that I wasn't able to explore.
Yeah.
And so all of that leading to, my departure from Tulsa in 2015, and then me coming back in 2019, and especially with me living in West Tulsa, near downtown, that's when I was really able to explore and really fall in love with the city in a new light.
Yeah.
Just being able to explore the Arts District, Blue Dome, being able to explore even more of the districts in areas outside of downtown, like Kendall Whittier.
Yeah, I feel like things were kind of really starting to grow in that specific time too.
Oh yeah. So yeah, just being able to explore downtown and all the districts within Cathedral District, Arts District, Blue Dome, and then being able to explore other districts beyond downtown, like the Pearl District, Kendall Whittier, Midtown, and just being able to fall in love with the city in a way that I just wasn't able to in college. Yeah. And to an earlier point, so much of it had changed and developed since my college days that there were so many new sights to see. My senior year of college, I barely remember when the gathering place was just a field off of the river. And it's been so long, and the gathering place has grown and flourished so much that it feels like it's always been there.
Yeah.
But I only barely remember when it was just a bunch of nothing. It was just an open field. And that's kind of surreal to think about, because that means I'm getting old.
Nothing wrong with that either.
Nothing wrong with that. Aging is a gift. But yeah, just when I moved back in 2019 to now, it's just the more new things that have been added to Tulsa, the more that I'm able to explore and get out and just see all the sites, all the restaurants, all the venues. And it's been a wonderful experience. And there's just new things being added, every day, it feels like. So it's been a really exciting time to not just be in Tulsa, but to be able to return in such a season of flourishing.
Yeah, I love that. I think that you had like a similar experience to me, in where like you had your conception of what this town was like even with all the constraints of, maybe being on campus or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I had the constraint of being a child, like
Yeah.
being in high school, and having those. That was when I formed my conception of Tulsa.
Mhm.
But then having 4 years to kind of like be away, and this town really, I think, do a lot of work on itself. And I know we're talking about a concept, but there's actually people doing this work, of course. But I think a lot of people really invested in the city in the time that you and I were gone, which is really coincidentally kind of coincides like 2015, 16 to like 2019 and 20. That's like the same time I was gone. And I think things were put on the path, or on, the train track, so that we could get to where we are now.
Exactly.
Which is really awesome. And I think you and I are both experiencing kind of this really cool moment in Tulsa that I think is really alluring to a lot of people. It's bringing a lot of people here. And,
Absolutely.
I think that the work that you do, both professionally and then also like with TYPROS, which we're going to end up talking about here in a second, is really a part of like that holistic experience. It's work, it's play, it's community, it's all these things that I think really are, I guess, contributing to why a lot of people say they really like Tulsa right now. And I love that.
Yeah, you hit it on the head.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about TYPROS. So you have I would say a notable local involvement with the TYPROS organization, which is Tulsa Young Professionals Organization. Mm-hmm. Can you share a little bit more about your experience with that, and maybe a little bit about what TYPROS is all about?
Sure thing. So TYPROS is an organization dedicated to creating experiences for young adults in Tulsa, whether it be through community engagement, connecting people, leadership development. TYPROS offers a lot. And so there are different groups, or as we call them, crews, dedicated to various fields of interest and whatnot. So we have business development, we have diversity, government relations, leadership and service, sustainability, tech, and urbanists. And so the crew that I have been co-leading this year is the arts and entertainment crew. And so a lot of our programming focuses on fine arts, local film, even sports, which falls into the entertainment category. And so we cast a wider net than we lead on, which has been a lot of fun.
I love that. And I'm noting down all the ones because I think that we could talk more broadly, or I guess a little bit more specifically about some of them. But like, I have attended events with diversity, with leadership development, with tech. I've yet to do something with sustainability, but I need to, because I actually am really baffled about some of our sustainability practices as a city. But the most important thing about that is it's so people-led. Like, I don't know, I guess I reflect on my experience in college where it was probably the first time I ever saw a contraption that you could separate your trash from your it was landfill, recycling, or compost. And we were composting at schools, dining halls, and stuff like that, because the sustainability organization on campus was this is something we need to do because we have many, many uses for this with cultivation practices or through XYZ use for it. But on the municipal level, Tulsa is a struggle bus sometimes.
I grew up having both trash cans and recycling bins to take out on the curb, and it's so weird that recycling bins are just really hard to come across down here.
Well, it was new. I think I remember living in Tulsa in 2009. We didn't have two bins, but when we finally moved to a house, we did. So it's apartment complexes don't have recycling for some reason, and probably because I don't know. I can't really theorize too much about it because I don't understand why they don't.
It's baffling.
But the same, I go back to the same thing about restaurants. I worked at a restaurant in 2020, and it was just it hurt me physically, sometimes mentally, physically, whatever. To always throw a glass bottle in the trash once a patron was done with it. That to me makes no sense. Honestly, I wish that there was some organization like TYPROS, to really help. And I think that they are. I'm very confident that sustainability has done a lot of work in the ways that they can. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that the only way we would get something like that is because of an organization like TYPROS being the convener of community and purpose
100%.
that I think can affect that change. And so,
Absolutely.
I don't know, another notable TYPROS project that I don't think I've ever talked about on here, but like getting a Trader Joe's in Tulsa was absolutely a TYPROS project.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the history of that at all?
I'm a little bit familiar. I remember hearing about the Trader Joe's being put into Tulsa because of that. And we did a similar initiative this past summer to get an IKEA in Tulsa.
Yes.
And a bunch of us just went on a bus to an IKEA in Texas, and we all had t-shirts on about bring IKEA to Tulsa. And we all just stormed we didn't storm the store, but we went in and shopped civilly. We shopped civilly. We had the shirts on, and it was really meant to be a talking point for customers saying, what's this about? And then we can explain why we're doing this, why we're out there. And it was a lot of fun. And I mean, I need some furniture for my apartment anyways. So it was like an excuse to go shopping and not have to worry about shipping costs and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, you guys took like 3 or 4 like charter buses, I think. It was such a cool, I think, campaign, honestly.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, I heard so many whispers about, are we getting an IKEA? Like, it seems like we're getting an IKEA. And it's like, no, this is kind of what you have to do to show that you want an IKEA.
Exactly. Yeah, they went all out with the promotional aspect for that, not just the trip, but also having a pop-up shop in the gathering place with IKEA-inspired dishes in a pop-up shop at the gathering place, and a few other events that I can't name off the top of my head, but it's been a full campaign.
Absolutely. It was a whole effort. And I think that's, I don't know. I think it speaks a lot to what TYPROS is as an organization in a lot of ways. It is like people driven, like I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if there's an idea or an interest and someone raises it, TYPROS can like really make it happen. I think another event that I went to probably through arts and education was, like a fry bread like 101 class.
Yeah, I missed that one last year.
It was pretty cool. I think I heard about it from going to FAM with you guys on on that trip, and that was. I mean, I'll just talk about the details of even that trip. We went.
Yeah.
We met up at a Panera Bread in Tulsa Hills, and all kind of carpooled from there, and then went to the museum. And you guys had coordinated some. I guess like facilitated guide through the museum, which was Dr. Corey Still, who I was actually like in network with in many ways, kind of through some small native connections that I have. And so I was like, oh, it's really nice to like meet you in person. Like one of his really close friends I ended up roommating with in New York when we were working together.
Cool.
And I was like, this is small world. This is small native world.
Oh yeah. Sure. Oh, absolutely.
But you know, got a little bit of like preface from Dr. Corey Still, and then also had the freedom to explore that museum like in and of itself on our own terms. And I mean, FAM's a really interesting place. I'm so glad that we have something like that here in Oklahoma. At the time when we went, I think they had like already broke ground on kind of like the resort that's going to go like around it.
I remember seeing that.
And I just went to OKC a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, ooh, it's getting close.
Oh,
like,
it's
it's almost gonna be
really
there. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm excited to see what that looks like. Hopefully bring a lot of traffic to that museum, because it's holds so much in there. But I think it really fundamentally gets down to like what arts and entertainment are trying to expose people to.
Exactly.
Although it's a TYPROS thing, Tulsa's Young Professionals organization, we did end up going somewhere to experience together.
Yes.
Bring back to Tulsa, have something to talk about, you know, make new friends and all of those things. And so I really enjoyed that experience.
Me too.
And I think that you guys do a lot of exciting things. Anything coming up for arts and entertainment that maybe people could look at joining or being a part of?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So next Thursday, we're going to be partnering with our we're going to be partnering with our urbanist crew for the Zinc Lake Overlook murals.
Oh, cool.
Which I think those were painted or finished around the time that we had the big dam party last Labor Day weekend. And so we're going to be doing a tour of those murals with the artist Jamie Pearson of Scraps. She's going to be leading us and introducing us to some of the artists who are responsible for those murals. And we're just going to enjoy being outside, seeing some cool art, and just enjoy being in each other's company. So that's next week, next Thursday. I don't know when this podcast is going to drop, but that's going to be next week whenever you're listening to this.
Yes. Or hopefully the murals will still be there.
Exactly.
You get to see them.
They will be there.
That's awesome.
We hope they'll be there for a nice long while.
Yeah. That's awesome. We're going to pivot the conversation just a little bit. I'd love for you to share a little bit about like what you do for work and how you think that has kind of like situated yourself in Tulsa. Talk to me about your professional experience.
Yes. So I got my undergrad degree in graphic design, and a lot of my jobs up to this point have either been directly or adjacent to that field. And I'm very blessed because I know everyone can't say that they work in the field they studied in college. And so I'm very fortunate. But I'll just start currently and then work my way backwards a bit.
Perfect.
So right now I work as the online media specialist for Phillips Theological Seminary. And that combines a lot of social media, bit of marketing, but it's still graphic design rooted. And I'm still designing content for online platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, designing digital billboards, posters, and other printables to promote our events. Awesome. So I've been there since 2023, January of 2023. And it's been almost 2 years, so I've been loving it. And so before that, I was working as the marketing and communications manager at AHA Tulsa, rest in peace. And I'll get to a little more about that later. But that was a really fun time, just being able to be a part of AHA, because I was a fan of them before I ever worked there.
Yeah.
And just being able to work there even a little bit, and honestly felt like a dream. And I was even able to be involved with Mayfest 2022 because of that. Just, awesome. Taking photos on site of the event, posting about it. My supervisor and I, we just had this really extensive, really crazy campaign where we promoted every single local artist, juried artist, and musician that was going to be at Mayfest that year, almost every day for weeks leading up to the event. And
awesome.
It was just, and I was even able to design a little branding for the event that went on posters, that went on banners, maps that were distributed at the event. So
I love Mayfest, like one of my favorite events.
Such a fun time. And just the rush of all that, and then just running into so many of my friends from other walks of life, on different times of the day. It was bliss. I'm glad I was able to do that. It was such a fun time.
That's awesome.
So before AHA, I worked as the graphic design coordinator at Mental Health Association Oklahoma. And that's actually the reason why I returned to Tulsa, because one of my college friends, Christy, she was hired as the head of marketing at the time at that organization. And we had worked together in the school newspaper. And so she remembered all of the cool contributions that I did for the newspaper. And she reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm hiring for this role. I think you'd be a good fit." One thing led to another. And the next thing I know, I'm back in Tulsa.
That's awesome.
And so that was firmly a graphic design related job. Just being able to design it was more print based design than digital, but a lot of flyers, brochures, printables, and also social media content such as graphics, even a little bit of video for all of the programs and all of the amazing work that the association does. Yeah. And so it just goes to show the value of networking and connecting with people in a city like Tulsa, where you have 6 degrees of separation from the mayor's office, maybe 3 degrees of separation.
Yeah, maybe even shorter, honestly.
Maybe 2 at this point.
Yeah, some people like really do have like that strong network. And I think Tulsa's like, you might be able to like jump over a couple of connections to get there a little bit quicker, which is really cool.
100%. So that is one of my favorite attributes about Tulsa. It's perfect, small, medium, small, big, as I like to say, small, big city, medium-sized city.
Yeah.
And it's just led to opportunities and experiences that I probably wouldn't have had in a major city like your Atlantas or your LAs or maybe even Detroit, honestly.
Yeah, Detroit is a big city.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think like one fellow marketing professional, like I'm working my way into having a lot of the experiences that you've had and working on those projects. It's a profession I find really interesting, or I guess a discipline, because it's definitely a combination of like so many different technical things. Like it's a little bit of sales, it's a little bit of technology and understanding how to use systems. There's obviously a creative element with like the graphics and the design process, and then there's also copywriting. Like it is a little bit of everything. And so it's cool to kind of have share that background with you. One of the things that you shared with me when we had coffee was that you kind of have an interesting experience in the world of having a few experiences of like being laid off or furloughs, et cetera.
Yes.
And so I want to just like preface with saying that I appreciate your candor and honesty about this topic. Sometimes it can be scary to face that, especially when there's a lot of, I think, rumblings about how it might have gone down, whether it was gone down in the right way, whether it was a budget thing, whether it was a people thing. It could just be a little messy when talking about, people's professional experiences and how
Indeed.
those come to an end. So I just want to say thank you for engaging in this conversation with me about this. But yeah, you've had a couple of these experiences, and so whatever you're comfortable sharing about those experiences, I'd love for you to talk about in whatever way you're comfortable.
Yeah. So I actually have three experiences with layoffs and furloughs. And I was looking back and I just thought, I'm only 9, almost 10 years into my career. This doesn't feel normal to have gone through this 3 times already. But maybe that's just the work environment that we find ourselves in nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely.
But well, I'll just start from the beginning. So, and I'll preface this a little bit because there's a little story behind it. So after I graduated from college, I went back to Detroit and I volunteered through City Year for a year. And it was through that opportunity that I got this part-time job at a startup company. And so it was mostly remote, but every so often I would go over to Ann Arbor, Michigan to meet with my team just to run down, what we're doing for the week and be able to meet in person.
Yeah.
And so I started in August, I think that was August of 2016, and I was there until June of 2017. And so, kind of the double-edged sort of startup companies that either your product is going to take off or it's not.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the funding just wasn't there. And so we were given 2 weeks notice, before we were laid off, which, that honestly did soften the blow.
Yeah, at least it was 2 weeks.
It was 2 weeks, yeah. As I get into the other stories, they're going to get more and more brutal, just so you know. But yeah, the timing wasn't great because I think it was about a week or so away from my birthday. But my team and I went out and they treated me to a nice birthday lunch, which was really nice.
That was good.
And again, that also softened the blow as well. So that was a bit of a bummer. And I thought, well, it's a startup company, but I did have a cool experience just being able to do what I did there.
Yeah.
And again, they gave me notice well in advance. So after that summer, I was hired at this ad agency in Southwest Florida. So I packed up from Michigan and drove all the way down to Fort Myers, and I worked with this ad agency. And they produced advertisements for, I think, auto dealerships or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a tough job at times because, after the first month or so, it kind of felt like I was a cog in the machine.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work felt, well, I don't want to say thankless, but it did feel pretty demanding. There was no routine. It always felt kind of unpredictable. One day I'd be in from 9 to 5. Another day I might be in until 6. And then the next day I find out halfway through the day that I have to be there till midnight just to meet this deadline.
Oh my goodness.
And just having to go home and go to bed around 1 a.m. then pick myself back up at 8 a.m. to go back to work. That was pretty unforgiving.
Yeah.
And what did I get for it? I got laid off from that job. So the summer before that transpired, we got the announcement that there was an acquisition in the company. And I think that was July of 2018, I want to say. And we were all speculating. We were thinking, what does this mean? What's going to happen to us? And then 3 months later, a chunk of us lose our jobs.
Yeah.
So that's how that
sometimes
transpired.
happens in acquisitions.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Not great. But so that wasn't as great because I got an ominous message on Slack saying, hey, can you meet us in the conference room? Super ominous, super short. And with me being in, having this happen to me before, I think part of me was kind of in denial about it.
Yeah.
Because, oh gosh, what's going to happen? And then they broke the news to us and we had to leave then and there.
Wow.
Just pack our stuff up. And when we were already, usually during the day when we're all honed in, the noise level is kept to a minimum and we're all focused on our work on our computer screens.
Yeah.
So I just had to pack up my junk and leave and not make a scene, not make a fuss.
Ugh.
Not that it would have been good to make a scene anyways.
Yeah, well, yeah, but
it just had
you probably would have been valid for that.
I probably would have, but that's just not how I roll.
No, that's fair.
I just had to pack up my stuff quietly and then leave. And they were there was a form I had assigned that I could return that following Monday. And so that wasn't great because being laid off and then having to leave that same day, that was not good.
Yeah, talk about, softening the blow. They didn't really.
Not really at all. And so because of that, I eventually had to move out of Fort Myers, and there was this whole thing where I had to work 3 retail jobs just to sustain myself. And I wasn't able to go home for Christmas with my family, and that I cherished that time. And so that was pretty hard being away from my family for that holiday.
Yeah.
But after all that was said and done, I left Fort Myers and went back to Michigan for a bit. And it was around that time that my friend Christy reached out to me about the association job.
Yeah.
And so that ultimately worked out. So flash forward to AHA Tulsa. I was only there for about 8 months. And even when I was working there, it was no secret that the organization was steadily losing money, and we were making effort, or at least as much effort as we could, to raise money, fundraise, to keep the organization afloat. Unfortunately, it was way worse than the board told us it was. And so I remember that day I had a dentist appointment, and I got this calendar notification about a meeting, and I texted my boss and said, "Hey, do you know what this meeting's about that they're calling us to?" And she had no idea. She was at home. I think she was caring for her daughter, or she was sick or something like that.
Yeah.
And so eventually I leave my appointment, I go back to the office, and I think the head of the board is there, and then we're all sitting there, and then they break the news to us about how there's no more money and we're all being furloughed. And that was one of the most harrowing experiences of my life, full stop.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing if you're processing the information on your own, but to be in a room with your coworkers.
With everyone. It sounds like everybody was called.
Yeah. The realization just washing over everyone. Some people just breaking down crying. And I'm just having an out-of-body experience, just thinking, oh, this happened a third time. Well, the second time this happened, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do if this happens a third time. I thought, well, here I am.
And then the third time, you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Pretty much. But yeah, that was a dark day. And we had to pack all of our stuff and leave that next day.
Yeah.
And yeah, even after that meeting, all of us were packing our stuff. Some people still raw with their emotions, and I would not wish that on anybody. That was not a good day.
No, it's tough. And I appreciate you like kind of even going through like the emotions of this too, like reliving them in some ways.
Yeah.
Because it is like, I don't know, you're getting at how ruthless it can sometimes be.
It can be.
I think the biggest thing that I really wanted to get from even having this conversation was just that, like, the fact that it happens and the fact that you can create a conversation about it, and
Yes.
and you might not be alone, and a lot of people have experienced this. I think marketers, I've been in a couple of meetings recently.
Yeah.
Just kind of like learning like marketing principles and like best practices and things like that. And they kind of warned us, like, if you're in marketing, you are oftentimes the first to get laid off.
Yeah.
But the only good thing about that is you're sometimes the first to get called back if things start to scale.
Sure.
Depending on what type of work you're doing at the time. And so, I don't know, I felt like this conversation about the experience, like, one, it had happening in 3 different like geographies for you is like interesting. It's not region specific.
No.
The job market, the instability of a company, or whatever happens, it wasn't necessarily instability at the second place. It was like, something positive, quote unquote, for the founders and stuff,
Yeah.
but that doesn't always trickle down positively to everybody.
Exactly.
And then this last one kind of being like, I don't know. I'm not really here to talk shit about other organizations that are just down the road or whatever.
Well, sure. Also, how doesn't exist anymore? So
well,
I mean,
yeah. But the people and the impact of it still are here in some ways.
yes,
And so,
100%.
I mean, the biggest thing with that is I wish that and this is maybe just a nonprofit like thing, is that I wish that people could call on the community a little bit more to support them. Like, oh, if there's no money, like, what are you doing to activate the community, to activate the revenue streams? And I don't know. I don't want for the local communities to feel responsible for these like organizations and everyone's jobs necessarily.
Not at all.
But like,
not at all.
An arts organization that was doing great work that I felt like AHA was doing, especially in the community. I mean, I had like that's a building, it's a space. It's not necessarily the organization,
Sure.
but I want to give credit to the people that were at that organization that were allowing those things to happen.
They're the real ones.
Yeah, exactly. And I like that year, 2022, I'm pretty sure is when this happened.
Yes.
I had gone to Black Queer Tulsa's like I guess Pride event that
That's
June.
right. Yeah,
and it was so freaking awesome. They had like 3 days of things going on there. I went to like my first ballroom show at the building at AHA.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's probably because of the people that were there that allowed that to happen. Not to say that there's not people now that would allow like that type of community to come into their space, but it really like was the tipping off point for me experiencing something I'd only seen on TV or only heard about in like New York City of all places, they brought it to Tulsa and they brought it to AHA, which was really, really cool.
Yeah.
Anyways, a little bit of a departure, but for the most part, I think this experience is something that many people will face. The letdown of, your a work engagement coming to an end, over time, quickly, tomorrow, like
Exactly.
it will happen. And kind of some ways to get through it, I think, or I guess just things that I would say as bits of advice. And I think that you also like hinted at is kind of just trudging through with a good attitude is sometimes like what you want to do, but it's not the easiest thing to do. And so allowing yourself to have the emotions, I think being able to reflect back on it, you talked about like one of the things that you loved doing that was working at Mayfest, like taking the positives from that experience and really reframing those as like, oh, well, this was a really good moment in my career because I got to do this opportunity.
Yeah.
You can still do that even if it doesn't end well.
Yeah, that's very true.
I don't know, whatever else you would add.
Yeah. And just kind of to recap all these experiences in general, I think, well, I know for me, it was so weird because after a while, I kind of unintentionally internalized these experiences thinking, am I doing something wrong? Is this my fault? Even though obviously that couldn't be far from the truth.
Absolutely.
Good. I just thought, man, I must really not have good judgment if I keep choosing these places that are basically sinking ships. But an important lesson, especially nowadays, that I've been reminding myself, and really this applies for trauma in general, is just, it's not your fault that it happened. It is your responsibility now, and you can choose how to carry it moving forward. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. I think that's a really good perspective to land on for sure, is like, it's not your fault.
Yeah.
And I guess in this context specifically, you aren't really going to get that from anyone else. You have to come to that conclusion on your own, I feel like, unless you're in therapy and you're processing it in that way. Or your support system, but like in the workplace, no one's going to, I don't feel like many places are very direct in saying like, it wasn't you, it's us.
Right.
It's not you, it's me.
Worst breakup ever.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for talking through some of that stuff. I'd love to leave us off on, what do you hope to see from Tulsa in the next few months, years? We're obviously talked about some of its growth and stuff, but from your perspective, what are some things that you're the most excited for in Tulsa?
Yeah, well, the most immediate development that comes to mind is just the runoff that we have in November for the mayor election. I feel that whomever gets selected for that role, they'll play an important role in kind of just determining the trajectory of the city moving forward. And there can be a lot of cool and exciting new things that comes from that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that definitely is at the forefront of my mind. And again, I'm not sure when this episode is dropping, but please vote.
Please vote.
Please vote. Because back in August for our primary, I think under 30% of registered voters in Tulsa actually cast their ballot.
It's really
and it's
rough.
just, there's work that needs to be done. But if you're registered, then please do it. You can make such an impact on a local level. Well, all levels, but especially a local level. Yeah. So please vote. If this comes out before election day, please vote.
Yes.
So that's one of the most recent one. But as far as the long term, I feel there's just so many new developments and new things cropping up in Tulsa that it's hard to keep up with them. And I mentioned this past Labor Day with the Gathering Place and the big dam party they had with the Zinc Lake opening up and the pedestrian bridge. Yeah. And just, it's so cool to have, Gathering Place was already being recognized on a national level, and to have those two new additions and more to come, it's so cool to be able to not just have them, but also be able to experience them for ourselves, to be able to go on the bridge and check out the sunrise or the sunset, or bike or jog, and even having the wave pools for kayaking or wave riding or what have you. It's just really cool to see how far Tulsa has come and how far it's going. Yeah. And I think the future is really bright.
Yeah, I agree. That's awesome. Yeah, This will timestamp this video, but Shields is opening this weekend.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Which is gonna be crazy.
Yes. Yeah.
The like sporting goods store that has a Ferris wheel inside of it, but also has like everything.
It's a very interesting store concept, but my interest is piqued.
Absolutely. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for being on this episode. I really appreciate your candor, your honesty, and I'm really excited for people to get to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you so much for listening to this episode of Grow With Us. Thank you for listening to this episode of Grow With Us. Grow With Us is supported by In-Tulsa Initiatives. If you're interested in learning more about In-Tulsa services for job placement and workforce development, please visit talent.intulsa.com. From there, you can join our talent network where you'll get access to our newsletter, and our talent team will make sure we put the right opportunities on your radar. We put the choice to pursue a new career and opportunities in your hands. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to be notified when more episodes of Grow With Us are released. Let us know what you think about how we're doing by rating and reviewing. It really helps. Grow With Us is edited and engineered by Rant9 Productions and Jesse Ulrich. This has been Grow With Us.